Hello, hi, and welcome to another episode of the Emma Gunn Show and a midweek instalment of Bullet Points. Oh, how I love saying that again. You can enjoy this on podcast platforms. You can enjoy this on YouTube, whichever is your favorite. I'm also publishing this via Substack, which will allow you to find both of those mediums. But this week, no book review. We did that last week. And to be honest, I needed a break after I read that thing. Jeez Louise. With all of that said, I am actually reading a book at the moment that I would love to tell you about, but it is not out for another month. And the author might be coming on the podcast. I expressed a keen interest, but I have not heard back from the PR, which is a slight worry because I'm 4 hours into a 6-hour book. So I'm hoping that hasn't been for nothing, not for nothing. But anyway, so I can't tell you about that book, but as soon as I can, I will. But writing books is an interesting subject because I have come to a decision about my Substack. I'm trying to think, should I soften this blow? Should I enter the podcast with something a little bit more frivolous before I will. I've just cut my own fringe. I cut it the other night and then I have just cut it again. If you're watching this, you can see it is not a short fringe, but I just felt as though I needed something. And so, you know what happens if you're a woman of a certain age, or not even a woman of a certain age, sometimes you don't want to go to the hairdresser. Sometimes you just want to do a little bit of point cutting over your sink and freshen your ends up. And it's always advisable to go to a professional and to go to a hairdresser, but that's not what that's about. It's about taking ownership. It's about doing something. And so I've just, a couple of nights ago, I cut quite a lot off. I probably cut about 4 or 5 inches off. And then today I've just snipped up a little bit more because it was sort of in an in-betweeny no man's land fringe length zone, which felt pointless. And so I've just done a little bit. If you are watching this, then you'll see I have run the new GHD Chronos curve through it. So it's got a little bit of shape, which is giving a nice bit of shape around the cheekbone, which is, I think, what you want a fringe to do, is to kind of do a little bit of face framing. And I'm going to see, I believe I'm seeing lovely Nick, who did my colour back in November, who is an absolute genius. And I believe I'm seeing him next month, and I might be like, curtain bangs, and then get his take on it, because my hair is still thin there. So I don't want to do myself any harm. I don't want to do any harm by continuing to snip. I should never have bought myself those professional, I say professional, but those like hairdressing scissors during lockdown. But I was point cutting my ends frequently. I cut my own hair a lot during lockdown, actually, just to tidy it up. And I don't ever think it looked that bad. It was only when I went to the hairdressers and they'd be like, who did this? And I'd be like, well, funny you should say, me. Are you impressed? It was like, no, because it's uneven. And so, well, whatever. Anyway, so that's how I'm softening this. It's not a blow, but I've been thinking about editorial a lot recently. I've been thinking about my Substack in particular, because when I plan my working week, there are so many things. It's definitely like a spinning plate situation, as it is for everybody. There will be events, there will be meetings, there will be the podcast, there will be filming, there will be organising the posts. There's all sorts of things that go into it. And then from time to time, I film videos for brands. And so every week is completely different. But one thing that I like to keep consistent is my editorial. And ever since I launched my beauty column on my Substack at the end of last year, I have been consistent. Every Saturday morning at 7:30, you will get it into your inbox if you're a subscriber. But a few things have happened recently, so I'm going to give you the run up as to why I've made this decision. But a few things have happened recently that have made me think I'm being a bit foolish in the way that I'm doing this. First of all, something that somebody said to me years ago, which is, you have trained your audience to expect everything that you do for free. So this podcast is for free. If you're listening to it on a podcast platform, costs you nothing. If you're watching it on YouTube, costs you nothing. My Instagram feed, where I do in-depth reviews, where I do interviews, where I share all sorts of content. Obviously, it's a free to access platform, which is absolutely fine. And so what I always said is with my Substack, it felt really uncomfortable and unusual to suddenly put things behind a paywall because to be honest, I just assumed that nobody would pay, because why would you when you can access so much for free? And then I read Polly Vernon's Substack and I subscribe to that. I pay for that. I read various other friends of mine and I see that actually the majority of them are using the Substack model, which is it's a subscription. And the thing is that I keep reducing the cost of my subscription. So it should be around £55 a year, and I keep reducing it. And there was a weird thing that happened whereby I went to reduce it, and it reduced the cost to something like £6.25 for the year. And I wondered why I was getting 100 new subscribers a day. And then I realized it was because, well, it was dirt cheap because of a mistake. And then somebody said to me, but that's all people are prepared to spend on your content because that's what you're valuing it at. So that's been sort of percolating in my brain for a little while, this idea that I always said that I would never put certain content behind a paywall, but I just sort of think, I think I have to now. I think I have to. Podcast is free. YouTube is free. Instagram is free. I've made everything free, but at a certain point, you have to get paid for what you do. And one of the other things is that I posted a recipe I put on my Instagram. I filmed myself making a meal, and then I posted the recipe on my Substack, not behind a paywall, I hasten to add, but just I posted it. But when you go from that link, say on my stories, to the Substack, and you want to see the written out recipe, it will give you an option to subscribe. And quite a few people said, I don't want to have to pay for this. And I thought, well, A, I'm not asking you to, but B, that hurts. That really hurts because it takes time. It takes time and effort to do all these things. And I don't want to set a precedent where it's like, yes, everything here, have everything for free. So to sort of cut a long story short, that's the paywall is going up on my Substack. And I don't think that it is an unreasonable thing to, and I've been so considerate and thinking, God, if you could subscribe to 5 people on Substack, that really does mount up. And I'm sort of, so I won't charge very much. And you can sort of hear in the fantasy bank manager meeting, the bank manager looking at you going, but then what are you saying your content is worth? I put a lot of time and effort into my content. It does not take 5 minutes to pull together a beauty column. It does not take, I'm writing something at the moment. And again, it's sort of like, it's weird because as it stands now, I think it's at about 1,700 words, but it's about why I feel foolish for not taking Ozempic, which is obviously, it doesn't take one day to write. It's a thought that starts a couple of weeks ago and then begins to build, and then it begins to build enough and take shape enough so that you can begin to put it onto paper. And then you write something and then you have to leave it for a day and then go back to it and revisit it and see where the holes are and see whether things can be tightened up and things can be taken out and a new perspective can be put in. So these things take time, and essentially I have for a really long time just not expected to be paid for that. I've expected that by putting that out into the world, someone will go, she's really good at this. We should pay her to do it. But that's just not the reality of this industry. That's not the reality of most industries. So as uncomfortable as I feel doing it, although I won't in the long term, obviously, I will be putting my Substack behind a paywall. And it's literally the one thing that I have ever and will ever, I think, probably ask people to say, oh, if you want this, you have to pay for it, like you would a magazine or like you would a subscription, which is exactly what it is. Whereas the podcast, the YouTube, the Instagram, everything else, the TikTok is just completely free for you to peruse and consume at your leisure and in whatever quantity you like. So, yes, that's just been sort of going on in the back of my brain for a little while. And I hope that's not disappointing. I hope that you understand. But yes, that will be, I will be putting the why I feel like an idiot for not taking Ozempic. I'm sure you can imagine where that begins, and perhaps you might not imagine where it ends up, but it's something I've been thinking about for a while. The Ozempic conversation has been really changing. GLP-1 agonist drugs, I should say, not Ozempic. It's not just Ozempic. But the conversation has been really, really changing. And I was beginning to sort of feel like, well, yeah, it has really changed, but what in particular has really changed? And Polly Vernon's written some brilliant pieces about it. Laura Kennedy's written some really brilliant pieces about it, like all on Substack. Again, all behind paywalls. I pay for their content because it's good and it's worth it. So I thought, well, this is my perspective. It all started with a couple of kiwi fruits, just so you know. But I thought, well, this I think is worth sharing. And I think this is an observation and a viewpoint that I haven't seen anywhere else. So I want to take the time to write it. But when I tell you it's like dance, it's always been the case for me with writing. You sort of dance around it for a bit, then start writing, and you sort of will look at your watch and realize it's 2 a.m. You're like, oh, I've been writing for several hours. Then you'll leave it alone. Then you'll come back to it and you'll sort of dance around it again. So it's a process. So by the time this episode goes up, it might be live, or it might be live 24 hours after this goes up. But anyway, just so you know. So that's what's been happening here this week. I've also on my Instagram been sharing my beauty post. There's been some really brilliant new and interesting products. And I think if you're interested in the beauty side of what I do, then that's a really good way to keep up to date with that. My thoughts on the new launches, my thoughts on not just new launches, but just kind of stuff that's been around for a really long time, but also kind of thematic stuff that's happening in the industry. My Instagram is probably the best place for that. I've never really spoken about the podcast much on my Instagram. I've always left that more to sort of the lifestyle-y side of things, probably to my detriment, because people now, where I've reshared a couple of old episodes, a few people have DM'd me saying, oh my God, I had no idea that you did these sorts of interviews. And I'm like, yeah, because I never really shouted about it. So again, you see, there's maybe been some poor marketing and not charging for what I do. So you can imagine how that has probably built up over time. Anyway, that's this week's bullet points, I think. Is there anything else that you need to know from this week? Oh, I did an interview. There's a new series on Instagram. I did an interview with the founder of Rome, which is a brilliant British luxury skincare brand, very much at the forefront of biotechnology in skincare. And it's a 7-minute interview, and it's on my Instagram with Joanna Elner, who is the founder. You might also remember, if you're a long-time podcast listener, that Joanna was on the podcast back in 2016 or 2017. She had not started Rome yet. She and I were beauty editors together on glossy magazines. Then she decided to do a master's in Chinese medicine. And then she started to do research into various other bits and bobs. And to cut a very long story short, completed her master's and started Rome, and is now at the forefront of biotech because of the way that it can impact the skin positively, which you will find out about in that interview because she articulates it so much more brilliantly. She's also someone that I WhatsApp feverishly through the week because she is a fellow Bravo fanatic. And if you watch the interview that I did with her on my Instagram and you think, gosh, she's articulate and she's brilliant and she's so wise and thoughtful, I will just tell you, she brings the same energy and effort and thought and class to her Bravo analyses. So I'm a very lucky lady to have her on speed dial for all things Bravo. But go and have a look at that. It's a really sweet interview. We did it at this event and for a collaboration that she's doing. So it was in a busy cafe, but I used my little mics, which we thought was very cool of us. And we kind of got the gist of like what Rome can do for you, what it's all about, why you should be interested in it, and what biotech is, which I think biotech, whether it's connected to Rome or other beauty products, is actually really fascinating and interesting at the moment. So well worth a look and a listen. The links to everything will obviously be in the show notes. If you have any thoughts about this, please do comment underneath this video. Please do comment on the Substack if that's where you're viewing this, or please DM me on Instagram where I'm at Emma Guns, or email me at office@emmaguns.com, and I would be delighted to hear from you. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I will see you on the next one.